welcome to a special spoiler review episode of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man episodes 3 through 5 on a Geek Bite brought to you by the
Geek Buddies.
Hey! That was a mouthful. And speaking of mouthful, we got a lot to get into here over these 3 episodes here. Secret Identity Crisis hitting the big time. The Unicorn Unleashed. So much was revealed in these episodes. We're going to break it all down and talk about all the storylines, talk about the characters, some of the Easter eggs, some of the allusions to the MCU, even though it's not the official MCU timeline. All kinds of conversations are going to be happening here on this particular episode. We should introduce ourselves first. I am John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Geek Buddies.
I'm Michael Vogel, your friendly neighborhood writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies.
And this is Shannon McClung. I'm an animation writer and a television actor, and I didn't realize it, but my green jumper kind of goes with the background here, and it makes my eyes pop.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that works so well. I agree. Well, let's get into it, gentlemen. What a series of episodes. This is the way the release order is going to be. They drop 3 episodes, then next week they'll drop 3 more episodes, and then after that they'll drop the final 2 episodes as we go into Captain America season and Daredevil season, Born Again season. So we will have that. But these 3 episodes are really interesting. Michael, getting your overall thoughts. What'd you think of this? We had Harry and Peter becoming a team here. We have Norman coming in as well and being a part of this whole situation. But to kind of juxtapose that or kind of go on with it as well, you've got Lonnie and Big Donovan getting closer in their situation. While we see at the end, but we have the 2 females in both of those situations getting a little bit sidelined and not happy with it. We get a bunch of new villains that pop into this. We get allusions to some stuff that went on in the main MCU timeline, like the Sokovia Accords and what have you. And by the end, we got ourselves an interesting situation going on with everyone in a position now as we go into the back half of the season starting next week. So what do you think of these 3 episodes overall?
We've had 2 weeks and we're already in the back half of the season. That's why we're like moving at warp speed. I did not know the release order. So I woke up Wednesday morning, made my coffee, and was really excited to watch an episode of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and then found out I had 3, which was a treat. It's great. I continue. These episodes confirmed further what I thought with the first 2 episodes, which is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is doing 1000% a better job of doing a what if story than any episode of What If season 3. What they are doing with this series is really smart, really fun if you like the MCU, particularly phases 1 through 3 of the MCU. Right. And the way that they sort of took Spider-Man at exactly the point that we met Spider-Man in the regular MCU timeline, and just with a series of different choices have ratcheted him in a very different direction, but by having things like the airport battle from Civil War happen, from having the Sokovia Accords happen, not only do we sort of get a sense of like, okay, this is where we are in the timeline that we know, but things like the Sokovia Accords passing have a direct effect on Peter Parker. So it really is great how it's all working. And additionally, and I know we'll get more into detail on this, I think they're fucking knocked Norman Osborn out of the park. The way that they're handling not Norman Osborn is so good and so smart. And
wait, is this what you're calling him? Not Norman Osborn? Are you? Is that what you're saying?
He's Norman. No, he's Norman Osborn. But like the way that they have knocked that out of the park, and you can see why they cast Coleman Domingo, because he is super charming, and it really, really is working great. Like they've really managed to. I've gotten in some arguments with some people on Twitter and some friends of ours about why did they have to change all the cast? Why is it like, oh, here's like the Asian character and the black character, and like why can't they just do classic Spider-Man? But like I think what they are doing is right down the line, perfect balance of an homage to 100% classic OG Spider-Man with the Steve Ditko look and everything, while telling a very fresh and different story that feels really new, while also managing to place it in a slightly skewed what if version of the MCU timeline. That's a really challenging hat trick, and with these 5 episodes, they've really done a great job.
Yeah. All right, Shannon, what do you think of these last 3 episodes? Did you enjoy them? Did they work for you? What stood out to you? What did you think overall coming out of episode 5 as we go into the final 6 here?
Well, you know, I wasn't here when the show talked about the first 2 episodes. So the first 5 episodes, I think this is an incredibly well-written show. I mean, it is super, super enjoyable. And getting to see sort of the timelines running next to each other, the world of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and the world of the MCU, seeing how closely they mirror each other, and basically what Mike already said about how this one little choice, this one little action, Peter went to a different school, changed everything in this character's life, but ultimately Peter Parker is who Peter Parker is, and you're going to see his choices and the way they affect this timeline. I think the dynamic that he has with Norman is incredible. All the little things that how Norman is kind of filling in for that Tony Stark role, but Norman is a very different individual than Tony Stark. So, I mean, and especially in Coleman Domingo's performance, as an audience, we know who Norman Osborn is. We know which direction Norman Osborn is going to go. But watching from Peter's point of view, not hearing the little bit of menace that you'll get every once in a while in Norman's voice, that is just so much that character, so much that villain. Watching the burgeoning friendship between him and Harry. I mean, it is so much fun. It is so much fun to watching how different aspects of the story, some of them tie up in one episode, and then sometimes they bleed into the next episode. Again, I think Jeff Trammell and Jeff Trammell's team did such a fantastic job with the writing. I think all of the performances across the board are so good. I mean, this was the best way, in my opinion, at this moment. This was the best way to do an animated Spider-Man show, because there were those complaints that where's MJ, where's Ned? And it's like, well, in this world, he didn't go that way. He went this way. And introducing us to these new characters like Nico, like Lonnie. I mean, knowing who they're going to become in the future. I mean, Lonnie's story is so compelling, and like the best bad guys are rooted in tragedy, and that's kind of what we're watching right now. The only thing that I have, and this is something that I mentioned beforehand, is the animation. That comic strip come to life. I mean, it reminds me of like an Andy Warhol painting come to life sometimes. That doesn't always work for me. I think the action actually looks pretty good, but it's those moments, it's certain still moments with and not with all the characters, with some of the characters, that it makes my brain skip a beat sometimes. So even though I don't love the way it looks from beginning to end, I love the story that they're telling.
Yeah, I think for me, I've really been enjoying these episodes. And look, as the oldest of the three of us and someone who doesn't necessarily run to animation all the time, I was I was not sure if this show was going to work for me. But I tell you what, this show has done really, really well. And Mike, you kind of alluded to it a little bit. It has walked this tightrope between what we know from the comics, what we've seen before in other animated attempts at Spider-Man, which Michael was a showrunner for Spectacular, and what we saw in the MCU. So they have mixed all of this together, plus the old school Ditko stuff for old dudes like me who remember those comics and seeing those and buying those and reading those in that style every time. Like what they did with the guy who is Rhino's sister or whatever. That's old school Hulk. That's Ditko old school Hulk design there.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. So for me, I love that they're walking all these tightropes at the same time, and they're doing a really good job. Do a couple of moments stand out for me a little childish. Yes, that's going to happen in this kind of animation. I just accept it. But overall, the story they're telling is compelling, as you said, Shannon, is interesting. And there is a tragedy to Lonnie Lincoln. This idea, this reminds me a lot of like Boys in the Hood, or what we saw in The Wire in the fourth season of The Wire with the kids, or fifth season with the kids, like getting sucked up into this world when there's promise for so much more. But because of a situation that happens in the family and his care for his brother, he is now sucked into this world and he's going down a completely different path than he was going to go. So there's such an element of tragedy to that I think appeals as well. And the Norman and Harry stuff, I think, is very interesting when it comes to Peter and how that's all going to work itself out and where he's going to land on that. Because you're right, we're already seeing Norman having those moments. So how is that going to play itself out with his grandiosity and his desire to push Peter? Because him and Big Donovan, there's connective tissues there and how they're handling things in a different environment and how they're pushing it. So overall, great stuff. And I like the way they're introducing the villains. It's very seamless and fun and organic, and how they're doing it. And the voiceover performances of all the villains stands out so well, So I'm on board with a show. And I like the animation. As I said, I like the Ditko references. I like the energy of it all for sure. But let's dial into the specificity, and I'll go back to you here, Michael. Let's talk about the Peter and Norman and Harry how can I say this relationship, I guess I would say, working together. Initially, Norman finds out that it is Peter who is saving his son. We find out that he's created this whole intern program in order to find the person who had saved his son. Peter Parker, he realizes it's Peter when he has that video, which he shows him, a la Tony Stark, when Tony Stark does that in the MCU. And so now he wants to help Peter, but he puts Peter through some interesting moments. He kind of forces Peter to go through costumes and outfits and little things like this that affect him before they finally land on the Foundation Spider-Man outfit. But like, we see that relation. But then when Harry discovers that he's Peter Parker, kind of like a CW way of discovering that he's Peter Parker, now he hands Peter Parker off to a 16-year-old. Yes, a mature 16-year-old, but also an influencer, and how that relationship deals. So talk to me about the Osborns and Spider-Man and Peter Parker, and how do you think this is going over these 3 episodes?
Well, yeah, I mean, and like we knew even from the trailer, it seemed like, and it was confirmed in the series, this is a world where Peter Parker meets Norman Osborn instead of Tony Stark. And like we talked about in the second episode, he literally meets Norman Osborn exactly shot for shot the way that he meets Tony Stark in the mainline MCU. Right. And so their story kind of follows that pattern. It's like you have this very rich tech billionaire who's like, I'm going to help you upgrade your suit. What you have now is great. You're very smart. You did a good job. But I think we can really do more with this. What was interesting about the second episode is that Norman kind of revealed that the entire intern program was, I'm trying to find the person that's helping Spider-Man build his stuff. He didn't know that it was Spider-Man, but he was like, look, Amadeus Cho, the woman from Wakanda, and the other, like these 4, you 4 are the smartest people that I think, given everything about you, are most likely Spider-Man. So he really, when he showed up in Peter's apartment with Peter and Aunt May, he was doing the same thing as Tony. It wasn't all magnanimous. There was an ulterior motive. Tony wanted him because he needed someone to go with him to fight Cap. Norman wanted him because Norman just wants what Norman wants. And I do love that everything along this storyline with them, they're playing the Norman villainous stuff, as we were saying, really close to the vest. I think, look, like Shannon said, we all know who Norman Osborn is. We all know Norman Osborn is going to be Peter Parker's biggest villain and biggest bad guy. But giving us the same charm that Peter is getting, making us like Norman Osborn almost despite what we know about him. Even with Nico sitting there straight up saying this is a bad guy. Like Nico's 100% right. But even we as the audience are like, yeah, but like he's kind of the Tony Stark right now. This is nice. And even like in the episode where he does force Peter into all of those outfits that are right out of the comics that Peter Parker wore. I forget the arc, but he wore them to hide from Norman Osborn. But even in that, they give Norman a redemptive moment. They let Norman have the moment to be like, you know what? I was pushing you too hard to be something different. And I realize I need to let you be. So like, it feels very great. Oh, look, Norman's learning a lesson. He's really meeting Peter halfway. So they're doing everything really, really, really well here. Particularly, and I think this was one of the smartest things. I think we all love seeing those MCU connections, but post-Sokovia Accords, when Norman is talking about why he wants to help Peter be the best hero he can be, he lays out a compelling argument. Like, this is a world where, like, the Avengers are great, but Bruce Banner is a problem as often as he's a hero. And Tony Stark, they saved Sokovia after they were responsible for almost destroying Sokovia because Tony Stark made Ultron. So like Norman Osborn is smart enough to look at the heroes of the MCU and kind of give the pro-Sokovia Accord argument of like, these guys are not great. But Norman is he still like thinks he's smarter than everyone in the room. So he's like, look, these heroes are bad, but I'm going to turn you into the hero that I want you to be.
Right.
And even those shades of him pushing Peter early on, I think what we're going to see, and it's going to help Peter and Harry's dynamic, is that this is who Norman Osborn is. It's who Norman Osborn has always been. Norman Osborn pushes his son as hard as he can, and Harry sort of wilts under the pressure. And then Norman sees Peter and says, oh, you're way smarter than my son, and you have superpowers.
Right.
I think I like you more. You're my new project. So it's just like they're doing, even though it's like completely modern MCU with all this new stuff thrown in, and they've made him the Tony Stark, so they've changed all of the dynamics, but they've still kept that Norman Osborn. I want what I want. I'm smarter than everybody, and I'm going to push you ruthlessly. And if you don't meet my ridiculously high expectations, it's not going to go great for you. And so knowing that all that's coming, but seeing them really pull back and play Norman great, it's delightful to watch this relationship.
Yeah, Coleman Domingo doing a great job. Of course, Oscar nominated now. Coleman Domingo doing a really nice job voiceover-wise, Shannon, with this. And as Michael alluded to, we do have a line where Harry says, yeah, being homeschooled is fun until you get a little bit older and then there's no one to talk to. And so there is that control factor that clearly Norman has in this whole situation with Harry and with Peter. And even handing Peter off to Harry is a little bit like, wow, why would you do something like that? But in his mind, this is the logical next step with what to do. And so he's a scientist, but doesn't really see what some of these mistakes may be coming down the road. I agree with a lot of what Michael said. What do you think, Shannon? Did you like the way they've been doing these relationships with Peter, the two Osborns? What's sticking out to you and what's not working for you if it isn't?
I don't think it's a coincidence that when Peter goes to meet Norman at dinner, it's in a restaurant called Eden, that he's literally about to go make a deal with the devil. I mean,
nice.
like he's literally the serpent in the garden. But the way that Coleman Domingo delivers these lines, there are those moments of menace, and then there are those moments of what we perceive or what really sound like him truly caring. Like when Spider-Man's getting batted around and he hacks into his earpiece, like for a moment before we get introduced to Octavius, I'm like, oh my gosh, Norman. First, he set up this internship. Now he's arming bad guys to get Peter to agree with him, and to find out that it wasn't him. I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. Oh, I was wrong about Norman Osborn. Maybe he's not so bad. But then you see the way that the differences between him and Tony Stark, and like obviously Tony Stark in the MCU has a bunch of issues of his own, but he looked at what Peter was able to do, and he's like, I want to plus what you've done.
Right.
Norman says, I want to plus what you've done, and I want to sculpt you into the hero I want you to be.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's one of the differences between those two characters. The relationship with Harry, I really, really like, because I think one of the charming parts about the MCU Spider-Man movies is his relationship with Ned. And watching to see the way that he is making friends. I love his dynamic with Lonnie. I love his dynamic with Harry. These are both guys that are going to turn into villains. I mean, and it is just so heart-wrenching. Again, from an audience's point of view, where we know where this is going to go, you're enjoying the ride, even though you know this is going to end in tragedy. Yeah. But they're both doing, was it Zeno Robinson who voices Harry?
Exactly. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
I think they are both, Coleman Domingo and Zeno, they're both doing a really, really terrific job. And again, there was a lot of pushback when the show was announced about it's gonna be different kids. It's like, why? And it's like, because this is the best way to tell a story, because we've seen the other versions, and I'm like, this is a new version of a story that we're familiar with. Yeah. And again, I'm just enjoying the heck out of it. And man, I really hope they're making a case for Coleman Domingo as a live action Norman Osborn one day.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, I'm enjoying it too. I mean, as someone who always is kind of in and out on the Norman Osborn, Harry Osborn thing, it always hasn't been my favorite thing about Spider-Man. To see it play out in this way, I've been enjoying it. I really like it. Coleman's such an interesting actor, and the way he's playing Norman is so unusual and coming through in the voiceover work. He legitimately stands out from everyone else. And I think that's on purpose. You want him to sound so distinct that there is something unique and interesting about this character. So you're forced to pay attention to it even stronger when he's doing the things that he's doing and the way he's leading up to it. And yeah, you're right. There's a great Marvin Gaye song, Piece of Clay. And he's talking about how everybody wants their own piece of clay that they can twist and mold and create so they can at least have some sense of control over something in life. And so in essence, that's what Norman is doing. And as you said, Michael, earlier, from Peter to Harry, I'm sure it was Harry first, then Peter, now back to Harry and Peter now to mold this whole situation. how much of his overbearing qualities are going to come into play when Harry and Peter are doing their things. And if Harry skews from what Norman wants him to do, how is that going to play itself out? Also, him being an influencer, how much is that going to affect things as they go forward as a relationship? And Peter already bringing Harry along to the movie, I think that's a significant moment in the relationship and what have you. And having Nico have to deal with that in essence, and cause more kind of maybe jealousy or frustration as friends that things are changing and evolving in their friendship that she may not be happy with. I like that element of conflict as well. But overall, it's that mentor-mentee situation where a young kid who respects this guy, what he's accomplished so much, can be manipulated, can be twisted. But Peter finds his moments to push back. He's very clear when the suits don't work, when every single suit doesn't work. He's very clear. He doesn't try to keep making work. He says, we need to try new things. We need to do something else. And step by step, like you said, Shannon, he figures it out. And that's the difference between a hero and a villain. A villain tries to keep making you do what he wants you to do. A villain sees what you've already done and a hero sees what you've already done and pluses it to work with your natural instincts and abilities. And something occurred to me as you guys were talking about, this is like 1980s. And I know this person is non grata nowadays, Hulk Hogan, but 1980s, Hulk Hogan was the hero and everyone turned on Hulk Hogan. All his friends all turned. This is classic storytelling and the way they're laying it out since the beginning. I love seeing it again here in this new version of Spider-Man. Now let's swing over to this other situation here with Lonnie and Shannon. This is, as you said, Shannon, really tough storyline that we see playing out here because Lonnie is essentially being groomed by Big Donovan to be a bigger part of his operation. We see him essentially exchange himself for his younger brother who got caught up into this stuff because he's a young kid and got tricked into this stuff. But now Lonnie himself, Big Donovan plays tricks on him, doesn't want him studying. He coerces him. He sends him into enemy territory to possibly sacrifice himself in this situation. He bullies him. He threatens him. He essentially makes him choose between the football team and his responsibilities to Big Donovan and his crew, all leading to this West Side Story fight. And in the end, it is Lonnie who saves him from the Scorpion in that knife fight and then becomes and accepts the nickname of Tombstone. So your thoughts over these 3 episodes, or maybe the 5, as the relationship has progressed to this point now, and as we go into episode 6, he has accepted the moniker of Tombstone.
I mean, subverting the expectations of someone who we thought was maybe going to be filling that Flash Thompson role. Like, oh, this is the job.
Yeah, I did too.
The captain of the football team. This is the guy that's going to push Peter around. And to go completely the opposite way, that this is a really good guy. Yeah. Who is he an incredible athlete? Absolutely. But this is a guy who likes science. And that's why he likes Peter. He's like, oh, I have someone I can talk to about this stuff because I'm not able to do that with my brothers on the football team. Right. So watching that again, that friendship kind of blossom, and then seeing the sacrifice that he does make, like coming home, seeing that the police are there, his father's talking to him, mom's upset, his little brother has done something again, and the sacrifice that he goes in and makes, like, let my little brother go, you can keep me. It really reminded me of a show that both Johnny and I watched, American Sports Story with Aaron Hernandez.
Oh yeah, yes.
I mean,
great reference.
The whole idea that this gang, this criminal element has now gotten their hooks in this really bright kid, this really someone that they talk about. You could go pro. I think that speaks to the short-sightedness of Big Donovan's leadership. That's like, hey, no, screw football practice. I want you to hang out in our warehouse versus like, yes, go be a star and like take us with you. Right. But watching the moment, because again, at the end of the day, even though Lonnie doesn't want to be there, he also doesn't want to see someone get killed. And so the way that he's able to sort of, jump in to save Big Don from Matt Gargan's scorpion themed dagger, stinger dagger, that just speaks to the type of person that Lonnie is. And unfortunately, it's probably gonna that sort of assured his demise. Yeah. In that now he is on a very, very distinct path where all the roads lead to him becoming this villain that we know later.
Yeah, and taking over the 110th Street gang like he does in the comics, Michael. So what do you think about this story then as it's played out over these last 3 episodes? And as we hit to that end of episode 5 where he accepts the nickname.
Well, like you said, I really like the way that they are mirroring Peter's relationship with Norman and Lonnie's relationship with Big Don at the same time. And we're really seeing these two things happen. And I think that Big Don, as much I agree with Shannon, I'm like, look, if you have someone who's gonna go pro, probably let him go pro and like ride those coattails. But besides that, Big Don gets that speech where he's like, look, your family gets to live like the way they live because we're protecting this turf. And like, is it a little bit manipulative? Sure. But is there a little bit of truth to it as well? Yes. Like there's I just love that they like gave Big Don just that level of enough of a level of dimensionality that he's not just this obstacle that's going to make Lonnie go down a life of crime. Like there is a level of, okay, well, let's talk about what it is we're doing here and why we want to keep the Scorpions out of this neighborhood and everything else. And you're like, okay, like there's in the same way that Norman gives the speech about Bruce Banner and Tony Stark, both of them have just enough truth in there that you're like, okay, like we know Bruce Banner's a hero. We love Hulk. We know Tony Stark has his flaws, but ultimately he's the guy that's going to make the sacrifice play. So Norman's giving Peter this speech on, these guys are bad. You're the real deal. And you're like, it's a little bit true. And Big Don's like, look, we keep you safe. And now that guy's seeing your face, and he's like, he saw my face because you sent me in there. He's like, whatever, he saw your face. The point is, I got your back. And like, it's just enough truth that you're like, and especially by the end, when he come in after Lonnie saved his life, and Big Don is like, this is my boy, this is Tombstone. And you're like, I know that none of this is good for Lonnie. I know that this is bad, and I know because I read the comics that Lonnie's going to become Tombstone and take over the 110th Street Gang. But they've done that with both Peter. Everything we said about Peter and Norman applies to Lonnie here. Where like we know where this is going. We know Peter is, to Shannon's point, he made a deal with the devil. We know that Lonnie should just fucking say fuck this and go do football. And he's gonna become Tombstone. But we are on the ride with them, even though we know it, and they've made the ride compelling enough that we're like, that's where the tragedy is. That's where the drama is in all of it. And everything Shannon said, like, I was talking to an unnamed friend of ours who was like, I just can't believe they made Flash Thompson black. And this is after the episode's aired, and I was like, oh, you mean Lonnie? Yeah, is that what they changed the name to? And I'm like, have you watched the show? Because it's not Flash Thompson. Oh, at all. Like, and I just think that the way they've done this, I don't want to keep beating up on What If Season 3, but all of these pieces of, well, why is Peter not with Gwen and MJ? Why isn't Harry his best friend? Why this? Why this? Why this? And the way that they've done it, you go, yeah, of course. This totally makes sense. So like I'm really excited. I'm excited to see where Lonnie's story goes, but given that he already got the name Tombstone, it's not going great for him. But I think seeing him step into this role, ostensibly probably going to get the white skin at some point, like the impenetrable skin, and ultimately have to fight Spider-Man.
Right.
To your point, John, with Hulk Hogan, but we'll leave it alone. But yes, you are right. But you are right. Like, this is Peter Parker. I mean, Peter Parker, this has been done so many times in so many other comic books, superhero stories, whatever. But Peter Parker is that quintessential, I'm going to do the right thing, even when it fucking sucks to do the right thing. For Peter Parker often means and Miles Morales, they do it really well too with his Uncle Aaron, but it is the quintessential Spider-Man thing is I'm going to do the right thing even when it fucking sucks and I have to take down someone I love.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that
just
moment.
Like Hulk Hogan.
In the 1980s.
Real good, brother.
Not now. But you guys have said it really well. So I'll just add this, that I'm looking forward to the moment when Peter realizes that Lonnie is a criminal and what his reaction is going to be, because Peter is probably going to see it while he's wearing the mask, and so can't reveal himself to Lonnie to be like, hey, what are you doing? All this kind of stuff. So that's going to be a fascinating conversation when it happens. And yes, how are they going to do the skin thing? now that you've made him black, how are you going to do the skin thing where he goes white? How are you going to navigate that and what the optics of that are going to be? I'm curious to see overall, but I love the work that Eugene Bird is doing as the voice of Lonnie Lincoln. There's some real levels and performance here that makes you care about this kid so much. So that when he's making these decisions, your heart breaks for him. When the coach is like, I need you to be out there. I need you. He's like, yeah, I'm committed, coach. I'm going to be here. Yeah. Then he gets that call. And unfortunately, he's got to roll on with Big Don's gang. And the guy who voices Bulldozer, that's Big E from the WWE. So just to make a wrestling reference there, Big E, one of the best over the last few years. So nice to see.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
It's wheels within wheels, man. Well, let's move on to the ladies in this situation. Michael, we have Nico. We discovered that she is with a foster family, but there is a picture of her and possibly her parents on the mantle, the shelf of her book. And we have bookcase rather. We have Pearl also feeling like she's being a little bit ignored by Lonnie, and not in a negative way. She says to Lonnie, "Look, I dropped you off, and but you kind of went, you kind of went under for a little bit. Now you come back, give me a rose. Well, let's hang out. Oh, I can't. Well, you can talk to me. You don't have to be the tough guy." So we're seeing these two women within these two separate storylines having to deal with not being on the inside of what's going on and navigating all of that and the disappointment of it all. Do you think they're walking a good line with both of these characters and how they're playing them out in those storylines?
I think so, but I would say all the pieces are there, and I think this is all going in the right direction. If I had one critique of the show right now, and it's a small critique because I think it's all going to work itself out, it's that both Pearl and Nico and Carla Connors and all female characters in the show feel like they've been pushed a little bit to the side because there's so much meat in Lonnie and Harry and Peter and Norman, and like there's just so much to build in those relationships that both Pearl and Nico are kind of playing the, hey, remember me? Weren't we supposed to hang out? That would have been cool. But they're present enough, and to Shannon's point, they're all really well written. Like everything from like again, I wish there was more, but like the scene with Peter and Aunt May where he actually brings up Uncle Ben, which we don't do in the live action movies, where he straight up is like, this is Ben stuff, and May has that great moment. Pearl eavesdropping on Lonnie, and then them having that really flirty exchange and her being right there with him to drive him home. Nico, I think, is like, they're nailing Nico. And even Carla Connors, when she steps up in the lab and like kind of, like holds her own. Or I can't remember the woman's name from Wakanda, the intern's name from Wakanda, but even she's funny, where she's like, hey, I'm writing this down. Like the females are all great, but they're all on the sidelines right now. So I'm really excited to see how they step up in the next few episodes, particularly Nico, because she's one of my faves. But yeah, to your point, I also think it's interesting. I'm interested to see how they're adapting the Nico story, because Nico is from Runaways, and the reason she is from Runaways is because her parents are evil sorcerers. So placing her in a foster home, you kind of get the sense of like, does she know that her parents are evil, and that is a secret she's holding? Does she not know this yet? And this is going to be a big discovery for her. But whereas everybody else in Peter's life is going down the road of, I'm going to be a villain, she's one of the few people that you're like, she's an ally.
Yeah.
Like and I also think, and I don't know for sure, but when you have a new best friend for Peter, who is a very powerful magic wielder in the MCU, and this version of Peter Parker got his spider powers after an exchange from Doctor Strange coming into the multiverse. Like, I don't know that there's anything there to that story, but it's like, okay, well, big magic user, that will be interesting to see.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, just to your point about, you were talking about Peter being Peter and trusting everybody, and heroes see the best in people. I do think there's also this fun dynamic that'll be interesting to see where it goes, is that the thing that makes Peter Parker is he, to a fault, will believe that there's redemption. He could fight Lonnie as Tombstone for the next 3 seasons of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and he will believe that he can bring Lonnie back from the brink.
Right.
Nico already is like, Norman's bad, Harry's a loser. He's just, she kind of is like always like looking at the, I don't trust people, and Peter trusts everybody. So I think that dynamic could be interesting to play too. So I really like all the females. I really like what they're doing. I just wish we got a bit more. So I'm ready for them to sort of step up in the story.
Where else have I seen that dynamic with someone who really believes in the best of people? someone else does it. It's a fascinating dynamic to have.
Are you my Nico?
No. Shannon, what are your thoughts on this?
Johnny's going to start dyeing his hair blue, wearing goth makeup. It's going to be great.
An emo. I don't trust influencers, so I'm on board with her. Go ahead. Shannon, what do you think of how they're handling Pearl and Nico here? And as Michael added, the other female characters like Aunt May and Connors there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think Aunt May and Carla Connors are fulfilling the role that they're supposed to fulfill right now. In that they are not the main players of this show. Pearl definitely is probably getting the short shrift a little bit, but you can see on the horizon where she is going to come into play a bit more. I mean, especially that line that she had with Lonnie after she dropped him off in the car, when she says, you don't have to be a tough guy. People don't like the tough guy. Knowing, and as an audience, we know Lonnie is going to become the ultimate tough guy,
right?
If he gets his powers. But also like the way that Nico, Lonnie, and Harry, the way that they all view Peter is, I finally have someone to talk to. Like, because Harry is, as you already said, like homeschooled, he's kind of by himself. Lonnie finally has someone that he can talk to about science. And with Nico, I mean, I don't know if it's because she's in foster care. It's like, oh, you don't have your parents either, or the fact that they got a little trauma bonded from when Doctor Strange came in.
Right.
But you can see like that is kind of how they all feel about Peter. And knowing that he does have this secret, except like from Harry, he has this secret. And I think Nico is the one who is going to take that to heart the most.
Of course,
and that you were not honest with me.
Right.
So the everything that they're doing with this show is just, it's really well balanced. Because I think we are interested in the drama and the tragedy that happens, but also it's really funny as well. Like normally, sometimes that balance can feel off, and it's very easy for that balance to get off. Sometimes the comedy can feel a little forced. Every comedic beat, for the most part, I think is totally earned. I mean, the moment where Harry comes up outside the movie theater and like, hey, Nico, nice to meet you. And, in animation doing sort of a slow take, that is more difficult than it is in live action, because in live action, we can look in the mirror and be like, this is how I would do it. Whereas an animator has to kind of picture in their head, how do I do that with this work of art? How do I do this with this drawing? Yeah. So I think it's just so well done. And Nico, I am really curious about the Runaways angle with Nico. Like, this is why she's in foster care. Are we ever going to meet these parents? These supervillain parents of hers?
Well, and I like the difference between the two. Like, Nico is clearly someone who is a little more sensitive, who's been hurt and damaged, living in a foster home. Where are her parents? What has she been told? And who she becomes, obviously, and what have you. So she's more hurt by what Peter is doing, right? With Pearl, she's very clearly a strong coming, she has that element. Like when he's out waiting for her, oh, you were stalking me. How creepy and cute, and her saying, her driving him to his home, her saying, you can talk to me. So she is taking much more of the stronger approach. Nico is taking much more of the hurt approach. Yep. So how is that going to play itself out? I mean, they both become, Marvel characters. She becomes Wave, and we know Nico has her powers. So this is going to be interesting when where are they going to discover their powers? Is it 3 seasons down the road? I don't know, but like, this is going to be fascinating. So they're how they're dealing with their respective situations, I think is fun to explore. And yes, with Carl Connors, and I think you make a good point, Shannon. For now, we've still got 6 more episodes. There may be more to come for them. And I certainly want that deleted scene with Amadeus Cho's presentation at some point. So yeah, go ahead,
I do think you make a really good point as you were talking. Like I still think it stands that like I want these females to really step up, because we've gotten so much from the other characters. But your point stands really well, which is, even though we've gotten just a little bit, the fact that you can kind of go down the line and go, here's how Pearl plays things, here's how Nico plays things. Carla Connors, very self-assured, very this, like all of the women, we have a very strong sense of who they are already in the limited screen time they have, which I think, to Shannon's point, just underscores the fact that even though I'm excited to see more from them, they're all very, very well written when they're on screen.
Yes. And speaking of women and men, let's move on to the villains that pop up throughout this entire 3 episodes here. We have ourselves some fun explorations of these people, Maria Vasquez and James Sanders. Vasquez in the comics becomes Tarantula. Sanders becomes a speed demon. And certainly we see that referenced in the show. Then we have this motley crew of people rolling through this whole thing here with the different names that they become, essentially becoming Rhino. We get the introduction here of Doc Ock being a part of this as well. So quite a few villains throughout these 3 episodes are introduced. Shannon, your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on these villains? You like it? You like it? And I like it. What's the deal?
Oh, definitely. I mean, again, I'm not a deep cut Spider-Man reader. So Tarantula and Speed Demon, I'm kind of like, these are fun powers for them to showcase in the show. But you know, having Norman's guidance, being able to point out the whole PDA angle, like they're staying away from each other, it's because they don't really know how to use this stuff yet. You know, I thought that was a lot of fun, having like sort of, you know, these bickering young lovers as these criminals. Like I was like, oh, that's a really fun dynamic. Introducing Octavius as someone that you can tell has this massive inferiority complex. Yeah. I mean, it's just the moment that he kind of steps out of the shadows and you see that classic green and yellow with the giant goggles. He's just a fun character to see, and someone that, you know, we know is going to play a role down the line. All of the Russians, is it Rhino's dad or Rhino's brother?
Yeah. Dmitry Smerdyakov becomes the Chameleon. Mikhail Sistevich, which is Rhino's father, is there. Mila Masaryk becomes Unicorn, and Roxana Volkov are the people. Then Roxana mentions the Tracksuit Mafia as well in her conversation. So yeah, that's the crew there.
I love the name check of the Tracksuit Mafia. I love the fact how they all kept calling Spider-Man Bug. Because again, with that thick Russian accent, that have you had enough, Bug? Like, it's just so funny. Like they're just fun characters to see. But also with Mikhail, you see that there is this kind of honor among thieves point of view that he has. Like when the unicorn goes to blast him for reasons, and she knows that Spider-Man will jump in the way and take the hit, like him saying like, that's not right. Like, you can't do that. But even Spider-Man trying to thank him, and he's like, you know, don't think that we are friends, Bug. Like, again, that was just a really, really great sequence. And another thing that I forgot to mention, again, just thinking of the comedy of the show, the moment that Peter's in the Hornet getup and literally becomes a bug on a windshield of a bus. I just thought that was I thought that was, I mean, is it on the nose? Absolutely. But was it funny? Absolutely. And a couple of moments that Coleman Domingo got, the moment where Peter swings in at the end after he helps him, and that, whoa! To me, that was just such an authentic response. And this is all the animation, but when Peter swings in and Harry's there, and you see him like, ah! Yeah. Like, again, that was just such an authentic reaction. But all of the bad guys thus far, they're a lot of fun. I mean, even like the bad guys that I didn't know they were bad guys. They're still just a lot of fun to discover right now.
Yeah. Michael, what are your thoughts on these bad guys as we discover? Okay, yeah, what's going on? Are you okay?
No. I'm doing the
camera again. Okay. Michael, these bad guys we discover here. Of course, we see the tech being used here as well, that Doc Ock is responsible for supplying. He even looks down on them and makes little comments about how this is all beneath him, that he is supplying them with this tech. And we get some great voiceover work. Travis Willingham is voicing Mikhail. Sarah Natochenny, who does a lot of Pokemon characters, plays Mila. So we've got some really good voiceover actors being a part of this. And what did you think of the way the villains were rolled out in these episodes and the performances?
Well, they're great because a couple things. One, we've talked about it already. Like, we have the heavy emotional hitters for villains all lined up in the wings. We got Norman Osborn here as our Tony Stark. We know what's going to happen there. We've got Lonnie going on his journey. We know what's going to happen there. We know what's going to happen to Carla Connors. Like, you can go down the list and go, we have the emotional trauma like lined up for Peter Parker. But you still have a fun episode and you need to do stuff. So you need to have like sort of your fun villains of the week, your challenges for Spider-Man. Tying all of those villains together into this reveal of Doc Ock, who's going to be another heavy hitter, it makes it all feel like a piece. So we don't feel like if you had just had Tarantula and Speed Demon show up, and they had powers, and they were robbing banks, and Peter Parker stopped them. And if you did everything exactly the way you did it in this episode, without the tech angle, it would have been fine. We probably would have liked it and said that was super fun. But having that addition of, all of this tech from episode 2 and 3 and 4, like, what's going on here? Unlike Shannon, I did not think that it was Norman Osborn, because they all have 2 O's on them, which I assumed was not Norman Osborn. The 2 O's were kind of a dead giveaway.
Good for you. Good for you.
Just saying, maybe I watched more Sesame Street as a kid. I really focused on those letters. But it makes all of those individual like villains of the week for Peter to deal with amount to something more. So I thought that was really, really smart. And then it really, even though like the second that Speed Demon and Tarantula drop the money in the dumpster, and the dumpster grows legs and like crawls up the side of the wall and takes off, I'm like, this is Doc Ock. But it was still like a really fun reveal to see him, because he just looks so iconically Doc Ock. Like, and this is where I love that, as much as they've changed so many things in Peter's story and the show, when they hit, like, sure, Norman Osborn is black instead of white, but he just looks iconically Norman Osborn. Doc Ock looks iconically Doc Ock, that Steve Ditko style. And unlike Shannon, I'm loving the animation style, and I particularly love the animation style in the action sequences, because even as Johnny, if you're listening to this, as Johnny's bringing up the images and showing stills from the show, when you look at a still from this show, it could be a 1960s panel from a Spider-Man comic.
I mean, this
like, it's
shot
just
alone.
like that. This shot right here of the 4 villains in the van, the Russian villains. This could be in a 1960s Spider-Man comic, a frame of all of them, like, and I would completely buy it. But when I'm watching it and they're moving, it works for me. And then when the action hits, it really, really works for me. So I think they're doing a good job of like finding those, I don't want to say disposable villains, but villains that we can use to move the episodic plot forward, and use them in a way that builds to the bigger villains. And then just on the comedy, because Shannon made me think of it, he nailed a couple of those Norman Osborn moments, but I think the part in maybe all 5 episodes that made me laugh the hardest was when Norman Osborn brought Peter into his office and did his version of Tony Stark's barn door protocol, like locked the office down. And Peter just went on a rambling monologue on how he wishes he had that when he invites girls over. Well, not when he invites girls over, because he hasn't done it yet, but he's thinking in the future when he does invite girls over. And Norman Osborn, Coleman Domingo just nails the deadpan, like, hey, so those are there so we can talk about Spider-Man. So why don't we do that? Like, it's just like the Norman Osborn, like, I don't know what the fuck is happening right now, but I'm not having this moment with you.
I've had one night of sex. That's how I had my child. That's how I look at it. Let's not talk about it. Let's talk about Spider-Man. Focus on
But like,
Spider-Man.
if you go back and you listen to it again, just listen to his delivery of like, so why don't we do that? Like, it's just like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. I've been loving the villains. I'm really enjoying. They're unique, and yes, they're villains of the week, but they don't feel like villains of the week, which I think makes it feel all the more exciting, because you've got the through line of Doc Ock. You know, and I should mention Roger Craig Smith is the voice there of what's it? What's the name of the kid? Marsden. Sanders of Speed Demon. And I really love Roger, and so I'm so excited that he's doing the voice there. But Hugh Dancy is the voice of Doc Ock, which is an interesting choice, who you can currently see as the DA on the new Law and Order. So I like his voice coming in as Doc Ock. That's a different kind of approach. So these kind of, how can I say this? These actors you've seen on screen and now get to hear they're doing voiceover work, like Coleman Domingo and Hugh Dancy, I think is exciting for what we've got coming up down the road for more voices as this universe expands in these last 6 episodes, and we see where it's all leading to. But yes, I love the design of the villains as well. They work for me. They don't look cheesy. And when they put the stuff on, I mean, the unicorn thing with the blasters, I mean, she was pretty badass. Like, that was an awesome thing to witness. So overall, I'm very satisfied in how they're laying all the villains out. Yeah.
More than the blast of laser fire from her unicorn horn, which looked awesome, the way that they actually visually showed how she can precognitively, I forget how Doc Ock described it, but how she can like see the moves coming, like as they're coming, like as Peter was coming in, the way they visualized that so that you could see how she was seeing it ahead of time was really, really cool and smart.
Yeah, agreed. All right. So any final words here, Michael, as you wrap up, and then Shannon after that, this review, anything I missed, any Easter eggs you want to make sure we highlight, please let us know.
I think we hit most of them. I mean, I think to me, the thing that I got the most excited about with these three, I mean, there's a lot that we clearly liked, but the way that we're continuing to line up with the MCU, like, is there a world where because we're already at Sokovia Accords, and also just by the way that like even Peter and Nico were arguing about, am I team Cap or am I team Tony, Iron Man? Cap might be right, but he's kind of wrong. I don't know. Like the way, again, like I said, this is Steve Ditko classic Spider-Man, MCU Spider-Man, and totally new Spider-Man at the same time. And that is like the fact that they're balancing that. This is, again, we'll see where it all lands out. I don't think this is quite X-Men 97 levels, but it is just below. Like, I think that X-Men 97 is the best that Marvel has done on the animation front. And I really love What If season 1 and season 2, season 3, but this is definitely, even with season 1 and season 2 of What If being as good as they are, I think this is supplanting them.
Oh, wow. All right, Shannon, final words on this and any Easter eggs we might have missed that you want to highlight.
I mean, I definitely didn't catch any Easter eggs because I don't know how letters look apparently.
Oh,
but there's
Let me tell you something, brother.
Double O, brother. Double O.
Double O.
Hulkamania is gonna run wild on your reading skills, brother.
What you gonna do, Doc Ock?
But there's a reason certain characters endure for decades and decades and decades and decades. And Peter Parker just has such a great worldview. I don't think it's shocking that we have Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which for my money is a terrific series. We have the Holland movies that are going to continue in some capacity. And I think, as Vogel mentioned last week, we've got the Ultimate Spider-Man run that Jonathan Hickman is writing. Nice. That is really, really good.
Yeah. And the Spider-Verse movies.
And the Spider-Verse movies.
Right.
So there's apparently there's never enough Spider-Man, but like plucking Peter out of a situation that we know he's going to be in and put him into an all-new situation is still just as entertaining. And again, a lot of credit goes to Jeff Trammell and his writing staff, because again, I was looking at the designs 5 years ago at Comic-Con. I'm like, oh, that could be fun. But to be this invested into the story, not just with Peter's story, but with so many other character stories, that's just that's a feather in the cap of that writing staff, because they are doing a terrific job.
And don't forget about Senior Breadbox. Spider-Man Noir is coming as well. So we're not.
Oh, I know. I know. Spider-Man Noir is coming. I know.
Also, to John's point, I am very excited for more Amadeus Cho.
Yeah, let's see.
He is an arrogant little piece of shit, and I love him. I love Amadeus Cho, and I love him even more when he turns into a green arrogant piece of shit.
Hey, I love him even more because that's one person that Peter is not like, I want to help everybody. Amadeus is someone who actually like irritates Peter a little bit. And I like that. I like that little element for Peter. Real quick. This is Easter eggs here for those of you who are watching. This is Luna Snow, who's a K-pop superhero who's getting in this shot here. So that's an interesting illusion. Is that going to play itself out a little bit later on in the show? We will see. And I love that we had conspiracy theories pop in. I know we're not necessarily the biggest fan of them, but the fact that Harry's over here saying, well, the real Captain America died 4 years ago. So that's an interesting element to throw into all of this. So also, I like it to feel kind of modern in that way.
Also really good comedy on Peter Parker's part with he's like, yeah, I mean, like that Cap didn't even do this. Like he died 4 years ago. This was all his clone. And Peter's like, yeah. What?
What?
What did you just say?
It's perfect. All right, but there you go. That's our review of episodes 3, 4, and 5 here of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Hope you guys are enjoying it on Disney Plus. Let us know what you thought about it down below. But thanks so much for watching or listening. Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, I'd like to follow us on social media. On Twitter, it's at Geek_Buddies. On Instagram, at _Geek_Buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, it's Shannon the Geek Buddy. If your reading skills are top notch and you watched all those letters and numbers on Sesame Street, follow at MKToon. If you would like to have more 80s wrestling references, brother, follow John Rocha at The Rocha Says.
1980s. Michael, what do we got?
Well, this episode of Geek Buddies was brought to you by the letter O. And oh boy, would we like you to do some things for us. Oh, how we would love it if you would smash that like button below, subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page, leave your comments below. What are you thinking of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? How does it stack up to all the other Spider-Man things that are out there? Are you liking the differences? Are you not liking the differences? Did you know that that was Doc Ock? Let us know in the comments below. If you're listening to us on a podcast, leave us some stars and some comments so we go up in the rankings. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies at Geek Buddies.
There you go. And please remember, we had an earlier show this week where we talked about some stuff, and we got our main show coming up either tomorrow or sometime this weekend. We'll let you know. But thank you so much for hanging out and enjoying this spoiler review of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. We'll talk to you next time with another brand new Geek Bite brought to you by the
Geek
Buddies.